Hello viewers, you are watching QTV, the Gambia's premier private TV channel, broadcasting from our studios here on Kairaba Avenue. My name is Aliou Sise. It is that time for your weekly State of Affairs program where we discuss issues affecting the country and beyond. Well, in a bid to cut down government expenditure, President Adama Barrow has suspended all foreign travels, including that of himself, his vice president, cabinet ministers, senior government officials, civil servants and employees across all government institutions and agencies, effective 19th August 2023 for the rest of the fiscal year, that is this year, 2023. Exempted from the ban, according to a press release, travels to statutory meetings, where it says the Gambia's participation is mandatory, and foreign trips fully funded by external sources. These exemptions, however, are subject to prior approval of the president or an authorized official. This decision has been highly welcomed by many Gambians. And then joining me today to discuss, this and other issues, I have in the studio Honorable Alhaji Mbow, who is the National Assembly member for Upper Salem constituency and also the Vice Chairman of the Finance and Public Accounts Committee of the National Assembly. Yeah. Honorable Mbow, good to have you on the program.
Yeah. Thank you for having me once again.
And also joining us is Mar Nyang, who needs no introduction, a very familiar face on State of Affairs now. Mar Nyang is the founder and executive director of Gambia Participates, that works to improve fiscal transparency and increase public participation in national budget process and budget accountability. Mr. Nyang, good to have you on the program.
Thank you.
Yes, I will start with both of you. What was your initial reaction when you heard the news that the president has given a directive to temporarily suspend all foreign travels?
Well, it was a root that was already been planted, and then it was growing. And I guess the branches was actually coming from the ground, and I realized that the government realized that this really got to stop. And that's why they had to put this travel, because really travel is also another source of income for public officials, right? The benefits and allowances that comes with it obviously had to reject. And when the opportunity presents itself, some of these folks have to jump into it. So I think it was a very good decision, right? And then I am sure if they're able to make a data analysis, fiscal analysis as to when the ban was actually imposed, right? And prior, right? Let's say, for example, the 2021, 2022, right? For the same period, how much was expended into travels? And then wait until the end of the fiscal year and then see, since the ban was actually imposed, right? What has been the difference in terms of expenditure? Then with that data, they were able to see how this ban will be effective, right? And then in terms of, reallocation of resources, especially into proper programs and development programs, right? This is something else that I guess with this data, they could actually make very sound public, fiscal decisions on it. So I guess, like I said, this was really a growing concern. And at some point, you kind of feel like the offices of some of our public officers are in abroad. Yeah. They're hardly in town, right? That also have an impact, right? So there's a fiscal part of it, and then a technical level, right? In terms of public services and administration, there's also a gap that it also creates, because if you're always away, right, and there is work that has to be done, and you are the actually signing authority, right, or you are the one that's supposed to minister stuff, if you are not there to do so, you're also delaying progression of public services, and that also impacts government services. So I think these issues of travel, I'm glad that the government have seen it as something else that really have to address, and really, obviously, we're in support of taking a drastic measure in reducing expenditure that goes into travel. The numbers are just staggering.
Okay, and Mr. Honorable Mbow?
Yes.
Your reaction?
Thank you. And I think I'll equally agree with Mar that this is a step in the right direction. Because if you look at the amount of money that we spent on this particular budget line item across the government, in 2021, we spent about almost more than 300 million in 2021, alone, actual. And then in 2022, we budgeted for 275 million I'm yet to get the actual figures, but for this year, 2023, I think the budget is about 279 million. And you're going to look at that, this is actually huge sums of money. Now, even though I understand that this budget line item is meant for both local travel and also international travel, because now they might be two together. And but we still need to take a look at it. Now, whether actually is paying any dividends, and I think this is the easiest way to be able to reduce, reduce some of these issues. But if you remember that we are running a budget deficit, we have a deficit almost like 3.9 billion, and any kind of savings that we can do, that would actually help the government, because that means you not have to borrow that much money, and if you don't borrow that much money, it means you don't have to pay that interest. So, and I think this is a step in the right direction, but I think they should take it even further. If you look at another area which is rent and rates, and I'm sure the minister would take a look at that one. Yeah, we are spending more than 300 million also on rent and rates. Now, how many empty government plots do we have in the Greater Banjul area? So why can't we take 2, 3, or 4, change them into in a very good office space and allow them to go instead of actually renting? We have seen institutions like the Minister of Interior, they're renting and they already have a land. So why can't we see what we can do to help them develop that particular land, and then they'll be all of them will house there, the interior, and then the immigration, etc., etc. So these are kind of things that really government needs to continue to do, and I think this is the first step, and I think it's a step in the right direction. But for me personally, I think they should even take it further to look at also those areas where we can actually have meaningful, reduction in cost that may not be actually really
we will get to that, the issue of rent, and of course the issue of vehicle failing, and all those things are areas that many are also concerned in terms of expenditure as far as the government is concerned. But Mar, I mean, this is not the first time that the president is giving such directives. I mean, suspending travels. We had this thing in 2019, if I'm right. But I mean, do you see much more seriousness in this one? The fact that it involves the president himself.
I think, yeah, because the seriousness here is 2019 to 2020, I guess. 2020, when it actually happened, I guess that was because of the COVID-19. I think the purpose are also different, because the 2019, when they also put travel ban on all public officers, was to, prevent the spread of COVID-19. Public officers traveling, catching COVID-19, and then also transferring it to locals. That was the objective. But this time around, I guess, the president must have seen the numbers, right? The Minister of Finance must have seen the numbers and might have advised, or whoever might have given the advice to the president must have done the right advice by looking at the numbers, because data don't lie. So I think, yes, there's more seriousness in here, like Honorable Mbo actually said. 2019, $377 million was spent into travels, right? And it reduced to 220 million in 2020 because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And 2021, it actually increased to 321 million, right? So between these 3 years, we spent 919 million, almost $1 billion into travels alone, right? So what dividend is it bringing back? What results is it bringing back, right? Not all travels are really unimportant. There are certain travels, government must be there, right? And then, sell our policies, sell our products, create markets, right? Those ones government have to be there. But if it is, let's say, for example, UN meeting where 25 people are actually going for that particular meeting.
Or maybe even 50.
That really doesn't make sense, right? So I guess creating opportunity for people to travel in order to get obviously the per diems, which is very lucrative. And so I guess the numbers are really unbelievable. And then there are some institutions, obviously, and why the president is also putting it on himself. You look at 2019 to 2021, the average expenditure on travels, right? If it is 100%, the office of the president is scoring 23%. Meaning 23% of all those expenditures goes to the office of the president. And then you also look at defense, and then interior and Minister of Foreign Affairs actually comes second with 13%, right? So with these numbers, if the government can go through and see all of these travels that have been expended in these ministries, right? Top 10 ministries, health is part of it, agriculture is part of it, lands is part of it, right? Why don't we look at the results from these travels, right? And make stringent measures, right? If it is supposed to be encouraged, and there are two things here. If a ministry has been given expenditures or budget for travels, and they're going out and they bring in more on the table, for those ones, I will even encourage to put more money for travels. But if it's the other side of the coin, where more money is being allocated and nothing actually is coming back, because sometimes people say government have no business to do business, but I guess government is business at some point, right? We need to be business-minded. When we're investing our money, we also expect return in investment, right? So when government does that analysis and realize that some of these ministries just go there, meetings, and then nothing actually comes out of it, even meetings, right, it has some impact, right? There's something new that you could learn, and then that could actually influence some of your internal policy, or in fact, administration gaps that you could actually fix. So if all of these things are actually not addressed, then why do we have to give them money? And this is why also having these KPIs, right, in assessing the impact of travels will be very useful in determining the next fiscal year's travel expenditure for a particular ministry, right? Then we were able to see some differences. But like I said, almost $1 billion is between 2019 to 2021. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Honorable Mbow, I mean, what are some of the areas that you think, I mean, we should allow our officials to travel?
I mean,
with this ban now.
Yes, the Gambia also is part of in some international organizations, like the United Nations, African Union, the ECOWAS and stuff. And then, oftentimes we are needed on the table. These are things that, if it is regular meetings, maybe you can do Zoom or whatever it is. But there are certain situations when you have to be there. Because sometimes there may be a need for voting. And again, your presence actually have to be there to be able to vote. So, and I think issues or institutions like that, like the African Union, United Nations, the ECOWAS, IPU, etc. I think those are things that are really very necessary, because the Gambia have to be there in person to be able to make any impact. And sometimes there are discussions that actually take place over those areas. And again, being there actually will allow you to be able to take something home. For example, I just came back from Benin, where we actually have a meeting with the West African Association of Public Accounts Committees, where we discuss, extensively about the debt of our countries, particularly in West Africa. What do we need to do? And this debt is talking about this internal, the domestic debts and also the external debts. What can we do as committees of the National Assembly to ensure that really the executive take a look at those things? Because again, by and large, most of us actually in West Africa we're carrying huge debts, and particularly the domestic debts, which actually sometimes have a very short-term payment that we actually have to make, and that could have a potential to destabilize our economies. So we want to see exactly what can we do together, and we've learned a lot. We have a lot of presentations by some of those in Benin themselves and what they're doing, and then countries actually spoke about really what they're doing in those countries, even though some are struggling. But again, I think these are crucial things that we as members of parliament need to take a look at, and I think essentially those are some of the troubles that may be really very necessary, because of these are statutory. We are paying every year to be a member of those associations, and one of the things that we gain from those things actually is capacity building, and to also let you know that maybe you are trending in the wrong direction, just to call our attention so that we can together as members of the West African PACs to be able to do something better in terms of our countries.
And after this meeting in Cotonou, I mean, what did you agree to do now? Going forward?
Yes, I think what we agreed to do actually is to be really very mindful of the domestic debt. Because normally, like I said, the domestic debt actually, the payment terms are really very short. And you're going to see that some actually spend a lot of time on treasury bills, on Suko Salam, and the maximum is like maybe 365 days, and the rest is like 181 days or 90 days, whatever, that you have to actually pay back. Now, when that happens, actually, you're going to see that the private sector actually may be disturbed, because of the government actually is mopping all the deposits from the central bank actually using for their own gains, because we are in deficit. So what's actually happening with the private sector? We mean the private sector now will have some issues to be able to have access to finance. So when that actually happens, also that actually has the potential to move the interest rates up. So because of their scarcity of funding in the commercial banks. So I think these are things that we really need to look at. What do we need to do? We can take a loan, particularly those that are self-paying or self-servicing, which are really very, very critical. I mean, loans are not really bad in itself, but it depends on the type that you actually have. And that's the reason why they call our attention to the domestic debts that we actually take. If what we are taking as a loan to finance the deficit gap, those projects actually are self-financed in terms of the paying itself. Those are really should be our priority. Now, in terms of just taking a loan, you build something and then that's it. So there's no money coming back from those things. So essentially, what we got to look at, what we are told, the discussion actually is around the fact that let's take a critical look at the domestic debt that we actually have, where the payment terms actually are sort of, and then try to see exactly how best we can do to go to longer terms, like 7 years, 10 years, 15 or 20 years, with very good interest rates and stuff like that. And from there, we take a look at loans that actually are self-paying. We'll be able to pay itself instead of just taking a loan, develop something and then life goes on. So which means you have to go back to the consider leverage fund to be able to pay those loans.
Mar, earlier on, I mean, you mentioned a whopping amount that is spent just on travels. I would like to know from you, where will you recommend, I mean, for the savings that will be done on this travel ban to be spent on? That is, if there is any left.
Well, into programs, and then also most importantly as well in the health sector, getting more drugs, right? And then also the required machines so that our citizens will not engage into medical tourism, or go into the hospitals just with the perception that I'm going to get paracetamol and then I'm going to be referred, right? Some folks now will even get their life savings to go to private clinics than going to the public sector, because if they know the service that they are looking at. I mean, there have obviously been some improvements done in the health sector, but I think there's still more, especially in the rural settlements. So I guess for me, programs, and then also into areas that will bring back money. For me, I guess mobilizing more money from within. Honorable talk about the deficit that we are running into, getting almost $2 billion as loan from domestic loans, right? Especially from the banks, right? Our revenue as well. The growth rate of our revenue has been growing at a snail's pace, right? How can we? And so we escalate that. The expenditures have been growing at a speed, at a light speed, if I can put it that way, and revenue has been growing at a snail's pace. So how do we make sure that the both are actually communicating, right? We get more revenue to ensure that it covers the expenditure speed rate that is actually been growing over the past years. Now, we are tax-based. We've been focusing more on our taxes, right? And then also some of the non-tax revenues that we receive. And I guess and then some of our donor funds. And I can give, for example, today, right? If you sometimes look at the Ministry of Agriculture's budget, you see somewhere around 446 million only from our own money. That is our GLF, the money that's coming from our own pocket, right? And that 446 million, 90% or more sometimes goes into just administration, less into capital. Now, if you go to the other part, which is all funds, donor support and loans, right? It goes all the way to 3 billion. So meaning our agricultural sector is dependent on external support and also loans, right? Which is not a very good sign. And you also look at our budget, right? The donor support, right? Some of the government officers will give you very sound reasoning, and then some of these donor support their commitments, whether they're going to be transferred or not, it's not guaranteed. So you cannot peg your budget and certain programs on donor support. If those monies do not come, revenue is not coming, government will have to reprioritize, meaning it has to get the house running before thinking of development. You understand? Some money will go into development, but the house needs to run first, meaning staff have to be paid, rents have to be paid, electricity, water, all have to be paid. So where am I driving at? Our sources of revenue, especially from within, we have to do more to increase. Look, even municipalities in terms of parking rates, right? People need to pay to park, right? You go to the airport, right? How much do you pay per night? $35. And you go to Blaisdene Airport. If you spend more than five minutes, you pay $2,000. Right, which is 2 times more than what you're paying per night. So we have to digitalize it and then make sure that we get more money from within. Tourism, I keep saying this, right? Our tourism industry, apart from the tourists coming, we need to be creating more other facilities so that when they come in, they get in there, get entertained, and they get more money. So we need to look from within. Also empower private sectors, encourage them. Encourage investors to come in, right? And then invest in the country. I guess that is one of the things that the government really have to look at and increase domestic revenue, for God's sake. That is the only way that we will be able to reduce the stress that we have on the loans that we've been taking, and then the deficit financing as well. So I believe that's one of the things that we have not been doing well. We've seen some innovative approaches that obviously the Ministry of Finance did with the Senegambia bridge, right? Which is one thing. And then if you spend more, let's say for example, if you get that money, you build another road and then you install tolling systems, right? From within, right? People travel, that money you invested into another road construction, you're expanding the road network, movements and goods and services are fast, economy is circular, the economy is also moving fast, and then also people are paying for those roads, right? Because there is tolling system. So I think these are some of the things I believe when we look at it, we'll be able to mass mobilize domestic revenue and then not only focus on the taxes.
And Honorable, let me now bring you in here. Like I said, I mean, when this news was announced, I mean, so many people welcomed it. I mean, including Mamadou Sabali, who is a strong critic of the borough administration. I mean, but people have their own reservation in terms of the statutory meeting that it is said is exempted. I mean, for many, I mean, this is just targeting, I mean, those junior employees in government. Perhaps most of the statutory meetings, it is the government, it is the ministers and the permanent secretaries who attend these meetings.
Actually, it's way more than that. In fact, if you dissect the travel vote itself across the government by ministry, like you have the OP, the National Audit Office, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, etc. You're going to see that actually the amounts do not vary that much. For example, if you look at the OP itself, for example, for the 2023, their budget may be around 50 million, for example. And you're going to see that when the president travels or the vice president travels, there are certain people that actually have to go with him, particularly security. These are things that you actually cannot just cut. He said, I'm going to reduce it or whatever. Because it depends on where he's going to, and it depends on how long he's going to be there. And those people actually have to go. So it's not like only the junior, no, it's not actually junior, because even the senior ones, likewise. For example, if you look at the National Audit Office, their travel vote for this year is about 30 million for the National Audit Office. National Assembly also around the same amount, around 30 million. So those are the kind of things that actually traveling is not like only the senior ones go. No, even the juniors actually go. Because for us, for example, at the Parliament, when the committee actually goes, we also go with some junior staff as well, like this, they call them, committee clerks and stuff like that. Yeah. They'll be taking notes and they'll be preparing the reports. And these are the reports that we present back. Like the Parliament, whenever we travel, we come back, there's a report that you need to present. Yeah. And that will show exactly what you actually have gathered from those meetings. And I think these are things very important. I'm not sure if that is being done in other places. I do not know. But I know for the Parliament, at least when you come, we have to have a report. Yeah. Even this 2 days, 3 days thing, you have to have a report. And the report you're going to present to plenary or to present to your committee to show exactly what actually you've learned when you were there, what actually has transpired. And then we can debate it and then agree and then often make resolutions from them. So the travel actually across the board, and not only central government, because even the parastatals actually are part of it. Yeah. So it's not like only the people that are at the higher cadre actually travel, but sometimes also it's a mix of everything. But I think overall, I think it's a good step. And I think also now the question is like the savings that we actually make, is it we're going to plow it back to other areas, other sectors like Mar actually said, or is it that we're just going to hold on to it to actually reduce the deficit so that you don't have to actually borrow more? Because the two things can actually happen. You can take it and plow it back somewhere else. Or you can actually just hold on to it, which means you don't actually have to spend it. And if you don't have to spend it, which means you don't actually have to borrow, which means your borrowing in the domestic market actually is going to be lower. So it depends on how the minister wants to manage the budget itself. But there are two: you can spend it, or you can actually hold on to it. So it means you don't have to borrow what you needed to borrow. So
Mar, it seems with this case we are not even sure how much we are going to save.
There's going to be savings, yeah. And that's the reason why I said earlier on it's very important for the government to do fiscal analysis. Yeah. As to when this ban was actually imposed compared to the previous year. And then we will see the difference. We are actually going to make savings. As of now, we are making savings because there's less travel. So this is some of the fiscal data that they could present to the president. Like I said, this decision must have not come out of the blue. Someone else must have gone through the numbers, see what is going wrong, advise the president strategically, and the president reasoned with that advice and then come up with this decision. The numbers were not looking good. And now they want to make it look good. And that's the reason why they actually imposed this ban. So now, after that, we'll be able to see that the difference is how much we're able to save. And then we can use that money to get it invested in proper programs and then also improve on some of our services that needs more allocation. So, I really believe that, yes, savings is actually going to be made.
Yes, I guess, do we also need other cost-saving strategies aside from the travel ban?
Yes, I think, like I said earlier at the beginning, and I think there are other areas that we can actually take a look at. For me, in particular, the area of rent and rates. Like I said, we spend more money on the rent and rate than actually in the travel. But again, if you have taken a rent and you've made a contract that you are, for an office space, of course you have to pay. So we also have to pay the rates in the municipality where actual government actually operating. But we can take a look at it, like take a look at the bigger picture. Now, how many empty government buildings do we actually have in the greater Banjul area? We have a lot of them, quite a lot in our Bakau area, in the Serekunda area. And why can't we just take a look at some of them, see how best we can renovate them and actually, move one of those institutions there? Now, if you go right now, the new ministry, for example, the Ministry of Digital Economy is actually renting. Then Interior is actually renting. Then you look at some of the, the other institutions under them, Weight and Measures, and a lot of them actually, FSQA, a lot of them actually they're renting. And some of them actually already have piece of land actually been given to them from the Ministry of Local Government. So why can't we actually have a strategy also where in 2-3 years time we'll be able to develop the Ministry of Interior, for example? I remember this is a discussion we actually had at the Parliament in, I think, 2021 budget or so, where we actually said, okay, why not we put a budget into your budget line for building? So I cannot remember the amount, but maybe about 20 million or 25 million, where they can start something. And from there, maybe 2-3 years, and they'll be able to have their own building. So we must structure in such a way that we reduce the rents that we actually pay outside, out, and then also, and again, when government actually goes into the rent, we are competing also, which means that actually has the potential to increase the rent in the country. Because government, if you build something like an office space and you say, oh, the government is going to take it, of course, you think that you're going to get more money with the government. So when government is competing also with the private sector in taking buildings or taking office space, it has the potential also to, to move the rates of the rent higher. So for me, it's like, let's look at what we actually have. Let's look at some of the empty buildings we actually have or lands. Let's develop them for our own institutions so that we can reduce the kind of rent we actually pay. And that actually has the potential to reduce that budget line item, in millions. Because right now it's more than 300 million where you have the rents and rates.
With all these advices and recommendations, how influential is the parliament or lawmakers on the decision that the ministers take?
Actually, I think we are influential because the thing is we are the one that actually approved those budget lines. Okay. I remember in 2022, we take a deliberate strategy. We cut the budget line item called rent and rates. We cut it, I think, by 25 million or more. So we said, no, we need to be developing strategies where we can go and develop our own institution.
Even furniture, you cut it.
Yes, with furniture we cut, yeah.
So you are like, how come every year you are told
repairs, yes. So it means you buy furniture, you repair. Even vehicles, actually. Yeah. And if you look at right now, the vehicle vote, for example, actually has been going down. And right now, it's not that much that we are buying compared to before, where we used to spend more than 200 million plus. Now we are talking about almost like being reduced by almost like 50%. So, and I think these are the steps that we actually need to take, because I don't expect when you buy a vehicle, it may take about 5, 6, or 7 years for before you can need to buy another one. So I think it's important that we actually take a look at some of those areas where we can actually cut without actually hurting anybody in terms of the pro-poor or in terms of some of the line items that really we can do without. So I think the rent and rates need to be looked at, the vehicles, the maintenance, etc., etc. Those things actually can be looked at. But Parliament actually has a great deal in actually approving or not approving. And I think on our side, we've been really cutting a lot on those budget line items like furniture and fittings, repair of furniture, the travel vote, the vehicles. We've been really cutting them, almost every year. In fact, if you remember, we used to have this budget line item called celebration of events. So it was us that actually almost zero rising. Yeah. So this was being used by various institutions like to organize May Day celebrations, whatever, or party, whatever they may call it. So we took a deliberate strategy in the Parliament to cut it almost zero. So if you look at right now, you may not even see anything on those budget line items. And they used to carry, millions of dollars. So right now we took a deliberate strategy to remove all of those people now. So not so why, that's why the May Day is not being very, and essentially for me, it's kind of like the ambience that you are getting there, partying, whatever. I don't think that was really very necessary when we really need to spend more in the education sector or to take care more of the teachers, or we spend to be more innovative in technology. So we thought that was really necessary and we cut it out completely. And I think after the first year, we didn't hear anybody talk about it anymore. So I think we've got to continue doing like that in the Parliament until we reduce some of these things.
Which is a good idea, which I think they should use that to better improve the welfare of their workers than going on a May Day, just to dance and play football. I want to know now, Mark, from you. We're here making savings, but on the other side, we are having leakages here and there. How do we reconcile these differences?
First, the rents and rates that Honorable Mo has been talking about, between 2021 to now, the estimate is about $800 million dollars that goes into rents and rates. And some of these real estate business men and women, right? They build these properties targeting government. Yeah. They will tell you categorically clear if you go and fish for office space that our objective is to rent this to the government, and they start putting staggering prices, right? And that makes rental also very, expensive in the country. Imagine giving it one floor $35,000 and having 4, 5, 6 floors. Government comes and take everything. Right, 1, 2 floor building, $45,000 US. per annum government pays. So all the others now, if they do their benchmarking and realize that this is actually the rate, it's going to be the same thing. So you have to really up your pocket to be at the standard of the government to be able to compete in getting those. So we have quadrangle that has been there for God knows how many years. Why not we create another modern quadrangle? Right? And then get all of these ministries there. Not all, but some of these ministries there. That saves the government the cost. So if you're paying almost about 800 million, almost $1 billion per annum, for the past 2-3 years, to correct myself, right? Why don't we spend that money into creating another quadrangle, make it a very standard office with digital infrastructure and security installed in it? Then other countries have been doing. If you go to, for example, Netherlands, their municipal council, I thought it was, it's just unbelievable, right? Massive buildings, and it's actually yours. You get in there, work, and then all that you are paying for is the administrative and then also overhead cost, right? But not the monies that the 45,000 or 35,000 per floor, getting all the buildings and paying those money into those rates. So I guess that is why the government needs to look at. In fact, it is also going to be the government's, let's say, for example, interest, right? If you are in someone else's property, if the person needs it, right, you have to find a way out to get into another place, and then relocation becomes a problem. And then but government files and information are sensitive. You understand? So storage, transportation, office relocation is not a very easy job. In some countries, there are actually some experts that venture into that business to support in relocation of material. So really, government needs to look way ahead of time and then start creating another quadrangle, a very modern one, and then save itself some cost. So some of these things, they are not actually rocket science. You might not actually realize this in a year or two, but as Honorable said, you just start from somewhere else, right? Get a very good location, start, make it a short-term plan, 5 years plan, get a very standard office, you understand, and then house some of these ministries. And I guess with that, we'll be able to say, look, we have a lot of pressure on our economy, right? And some of these pressure are actually internally, motivated. Some of them are actually externally motivated. And some of them are also motivated because of government's action. So how do we reduce those pressures? We have a lot of pressures on our budget, right? Like I said earlier on, if the expenditure keeps skyrocketing and the revenue is not meeting that particular pace, then it becomes more problematic, right?
Indeed.
So, also another thing,
we will go back. I understand we have to go for a short break. Well, viewers, you remember you're watching QTV, the Gambia's first private TV station, and we are broadcasting from our studios here on Kairaba Avenue, just right behind the Council main building. I'm your host, Aliou Cisse, and my guest this week, Honorable Alaji Mbow, National Assembly member for Upper Salem constituency and vice chairman of the FPAC committee at the Parliament, and of course, Mar Nyang, co-founder and Executive Director of Gambia Participates. We're discussing the government's recent move to ban all foreign travels and other expenditures. We'll go with a short break, and when we return, the discussion continues. Do stay tuned.
Technology has always been at the forefront of our lives, and the way we use it has evolved drastically over the years. With the advent of 5G internet, we are entering a new era of technological innovation that promises to transform the way we live, work, and play. 5G internet is capable of providing data speeds up to 100 times faster than 4G, making it the ideal solution for streaming high-quality videos, playing online games, and downloading large files on the go. 5G internet is already transforming cities across the globe, powering smart cities, self-driving cars, and virtual reality experiences that were once thought impossible. 5G internet is also paving the way for Internet of Things, allowing for seamless connectivity between devices and the creation of a truly connected world. For the first time in the Gambia, QCell is bringing tomorrow's technology to you today with the launch of QCell 5G Internet. Get ready to experience the out-of-this-world wonders of QCell's 5G Internet. For more information, call 111. QCell. We innovate, others follow.
Hello viewers, welcome back from that short break. You're reminded that you're watching QTV, the Gambia's first private TV station, and we are broadcasting from our studios here on Kairaba Avenue. My name is Aliou Cisse, and this is your weekly state of affairs. Our guest, Honorable Alaji Mbow, National Assembly member, and Mar Nyang, co-founder and executive director of Gambia Participates. Mar, just earlier on, we had Honorable was talking about the issue of managing our domestic debt and all that, and you also mentioned the same. You talk about the need to divert some of these savings into the health sector, agriculture sector, education. And here you're talking about the need to also construct perhaps a new quadrangle. I mean, looking at all these things, I mean, where do you think we're going to get the funds from to be able to maybe construct a new quadrangle?
Well, if government needs funds, it gets funds. I mean, creditors are always willing to give government funds, right? So, I mean, if government needs it, they will actually get those funds. So the question is about plan, not about the money. From within, maybe perhaps the tricky question to ask will be whether we were able to get it from our own funds, right? That will be something that the government could actually work on. I mean, when the government was constructing some of these roads, right, there are certain roads that the government were actually financing 100% by the government itself, right? So it's all about prioritization of government fiscal expenditure in the short term. That's why they have what they call MTF, the medium-term economic fiscal framework, right? Which is always aligned to the National Development Plan. So if that is part of the government's plan, they will put it into the National Development Plan, which is also a living document, and then also the MTF. So the moment it's on the MTF, the ministry that's responsible to actually get that work done, they will actually get it done within 5 years. You understand? So the money is there. It's all about plan and then also prioritization.
Let me now bring Honorable Mbow here. Yeah. He says the money is already there. Is the money there?
I said,
no, if they want to.
I said if the government needs the money,
okay,
they will get the money.
Okay,
exactly.
The money is there.
That's right.
Yeah. I want to know, should that be a priority for the government now?
For me,
building a new quadrangle.
Yes, I think this should be a long-term plan. Okay. Because in the short term, if you look at the numbers we are paying in terms of rent, it's a lot. Now, can you imagine if we are able to save, let's say, 10% every year? Because right now we are paying more than 325 million on rent and rates. Now, let's say if we are able to annually. So let's say if we are able to save 10% of that amount, you're talking about almost 30 million every year. So in the next 5 years or so, you're talking about almost 150 million. I'm not sure if that will be able to be enough to build a new quadrangle. But again, if you are building a new one, you are not building for all the ministries. No, you are building only for ministries that do not actually have an office space right now. For example, the Minister of Trade, the Minister of Digital Economy, and then you can push here and there. For example, digital economy. If you look at in Abuko, for example, where you have Gamtel, the huge land, whatever, they can do it straight with Gamtel. Let's see what the ministry actually can provide to Gamtel, and Gamtel to relinquish part of their land, and the ministry can build there. Now, same thing with agriculture. Agriculture, if you go to Abuko also, livestock, a lot of them there in agriculture. So why can't we see how best? And Nari also in the same area. Yeah. So the moment you start moving the agriculture, in fact, some members are saying that the agriculture, the ministry should be moved to CRR. Which our support.
Agriculture.
Yeah, exactly. Which
have your office in Banjul
exactly, yeah. So we are support. So all is about strategy and also thinking about the future. So if we are able to move 2 or 3, for example, Minister of Digital Economy, Minister of Agriculture, and also even the Minister of Tourism, for example, let them come to the area where you have the tourism sector, exactly TDA, and then see what we can do. So where they vacate in Banjul, in the current quadrangle, then that could be occupied by the other ministries. So for me, I think it's a long-term plan they need to do. If they need money to do it, they should be able to get the money. Just like I said, yeah.
Have you made this suggestion to the government?
Not yet. But as the committee is concerned, we told them to see a better way of actually building their own office. Particularly the Minister of Digital Economy, we told them. In fact, they told us actually they already have a land. The Minister of Trade also, this directorate of the Standards Bureau, for example, they also said they also have a land. So what we are saying is like, why can't we actually allocate the money to be able to build? But if you look at the bigger picture, why can't you just have one minister and then all the directors under you or all the other agencies that are under you in the same place? It makes it much easier for meetings. It makes it much easier for quick decisions to be made instead of one being in Banjul, one in Serekunda, one in Abuko, one in other places. But if they are able to come together, like the Minister of Trade, for example, you can have Minister of Ministers there, you can have Standards Bureau there, and you can have the main ministry there, and all the other institutions under them. Institutions exactly under there. Yeah. If you go to the Minister of Health, it's the same thing also. You go to the Minister of Agriculture, it's the same thing. Most of them actually they are not in Banjul, but they are in maybe Abuko, Kuta, and all the other areas. So bringing them together actually helps them to make quick decisions. For example, to organize meetings is faster, and again that would actually reduce the rent that we actually have to pay every year. So for me, it's a long-term plan. They need to start thinking that we need to actually create a new quadrangle, and there are other offices, for example, ministry that actually don't have a home. You cannot be renting all over, and where do you call home? So I think there's a need for a deliberate strategy, a long-term strategy, to try to have a plan for a second quadrangle where we can actually house all the other ministries and their satellite institutions in the same place, and that will actually help the government in the long term to be able to save on these rents. But rates they have to pay.
Exactly. And Mar, you talk about the issue of savings. I'll bring you back to the issue of expenditure. Where, in your own opinion, name me 2 areas that you think needs urgent priority as far as these savings are concerned, where do you think we should spend them on?
Drugs, drugs, and then also, I guess, mechanization of agriculture. And I've also believe that the government could actually take this solely or engage into partnership with the private sector to create a local market, a domestic market, when local products are actually produced, right? Processed. So processing factories, right? Invest into that. Once it is processed, those products are actually going to be sold. So you're also encouraging farmers to do more production because they know there's going to be a market, right? The factories might purchase it, or they will purchase it, process it, and then sell it to the local. So you have the circular economy. So I think that's one for agriculture. And then also with health, right? The drugs that I was talking about, people go to the hospitals with the mindset that they're going to be given prescription. So what they normally look for is the lab test, right? But for the medications, they know they're only going to get paracetamol if they are unlucky. You understand? So that is also one thing. The other thing, like I said before, we can be investing money into services, which is because that's government's primary responsibility, but it's also government's responsibility to generate funds, right? We invest into areas that will also bring more money for us. A revenue of 16 billion, and then you have 13 billion if it's revenue on taxes and non-taxes, right? 13 billion of that is dependent on tax. Only 2.something billion is coming from non-tax. So that really, for non-tax, I guess we can actually do way more to bring money. And then also, decentralize the economy in a sense that you create a new village or a new town, like what Senegal is doing, and just like what Nigeria did with Abuja as well, right?
Yeah.
Create a new city. I mean, they're doing that with the private sector. We've seen TAF doing it and other investors getting into it. So those are some of the things that like your suggestion in getting agriculture ministry in CRR. What is going to happen now? That's also discouraging rural urban migration. You understand? And then also encouraging more, investors get into host that end, because Sierra have been really seen as a dry market. When did we in fact see a bank? Was it Ajib recently that actually introduced a bank in Sierra? So in some of these things, we should not put much pressure on the urban area. There's growing interest, right, to invest into certain areas, but that's also depending on government policies, government wills, and then government interests. So I guess that's what we need to move on to.
Honorable, do you agree with him, or do you have a different view as to where exactly we should spend these savings?
Yes, I agree with him holistically, and in fact, even on the education side. In fact, there are so many places that you can actually spend some of this money. For example, in the education sector, for example, if you go up country, the way the teachers actually live is horrible. And you expect those people to be comfortable, to be able to go in the classroom, they flow in there, and then be able to teach the children. Their living conditions actually is just appalling. And sometimes they may not be able to get a place to rent. So you're going to see that even where teachers actually are housed, these are things that we can actually spend money on.
It's now being improved with the MRC Holland Foundation.
Yes, but slowly. You don't. Yeah. And all those things. But you don't want to, put all that, on somebody to help. So I think government also need to take a strategy to be able to start building it. So now I like the idea they're doing right now, because all the schools they're building, new school they're building right now, it also comes with staff quarters, which I think is the step in the right direction. But we still need to do better, particularly in hard to reach areas where we actually have the most issues. Now the other area also, I think there's one particular sector that we are not really getting much from, which is the fishing sector. I think these are things that we need to invest in, particularly the youth. And I'm happy that the Minister of Higher Education started to put a TVET training school, in the Sanyang area to be able to train, the youth, for life-changing, skills. And I think this is actually essential. So for me, it's like you develop that area, but above all, give them the equipment that they will need to be able to go out there. I mean, we have this agreement with the European Union, with the fishing trawl, whatever. So why can't we actually have our own trawlers actually as a country? Let's create, PPP, where we actually have our own trawlers, where we actually go out there fishing. Exactly. Take ownership of the sea, take ownership of the resources from the sea, and then also if they want, they can come and buy from us, so that they don't even have to go to sea. We can package it, adding value additions, and actually sell out that, to the rest of Europe. So if you look at it actually, for them coming, they are creating employment for themselves. But here, if we are able to invest in it, we are able to go out there at sea, get the fish, process them, put them in cold storage, and then ship them for external. So in that case, you're actually having value additions, and also you are employing your own youth, because you are giving them life skills that they actually use. So for me, I think we need to also take a look at the fishing sector itself, and then have deliberate strategies where we can actually invest in them to be able to generate more resources from it, so that will actually diversify the resource base of the country. So that's the real issue.
You both have brilliant ideas. You have brilliant suggestions as to the way forward. Why is it that the government is not implementing most of these ideas that you are sharing with me here?
Well, first, we don't have the thumb to press the decision button. We can only advocate and influence for the ones that have the thumb to press the button. Yeah. And this is the role of civil society. I guess for us, we started having this conversation. We've been having conversations on some policy changes, and that's why we work very closely with the likes of Honorable and the National Assembly, work very closely with the Ministry of Finance on more focusedly on fiscal transparency issues, and audit office, and in fact local government authorities, more focusing on expanding fiscal transparency. But in terms of revenue, generation, those are some of the things that we wanted to now get into. And I really wanted to comment on what he has mentioned, and this is a conversation that we rarely have. Our waters are underexploited by our authorities. And then one thing that is not known, we have vessels that have been doing what we call IUU, right? Illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing. And they get into our waters illegally, mine our resources, and then also exploit our resources and then sell it out. And the other thing that vessels are also doing, I've just been watching one video interview with another TV, right? Interviewing fishermen in Tanje and Sanyang about the vessels that encroach in the waters. They're given land, some of them are given the licenses, but what they do is the nets that are owned by our locals, they get into it, destroys those nets in order to monopolize the business, right? Those issues are unaddressed. And what does it do? It creates monopoly for those vessels. And then also the citizens now have to depend on the prices that these foreign vessels are actually bringing in. So I guess the Ministry of Fisheries really have to do well. And then in terms of vessels that Honorable is talking about, even if the government don't want to get into business, you know what Senegal is doing, right? They're supporting local fishermen with boats, right? And they give it as a loan. So you go see fish, get your money, and then you pay part of it to the state. That's, so at some point, Minister of Fisheries started it, but now let's go beyond that, right? Let's get sophisticated vessels. Sophisticated vessels empower our youth that are ready to take the risk that get into the Mediterranean Sea. They will be able to take the risk to get to the sea, fish, make money, invest to themselves, and then also reduce the cost of fish in the country. Fish money will actually go down. So I guess really, government have to be business-minded. And I'm so they're business-minded at some point. Now the issue has to do with political, because the government is more, officers that are there, they get the expertise more than I do. They know more than I do. So the issue is about prioritizing, and let's really not focus on the really urgent issues, and then we do it. Let's look at the importance of the long term and build this country's resources. There was a reason why the British, at the time when they were colonizing the Gambia, were interested in our waters. Apart from just controlling the slavery vessels, right? But I guess our resources are underexploited, and I think we need to put more, maybe perhaps get more Gambian experts like Jammeh did before when he sent others to go and study, to come by and look at our resources. How can we maximize and utilize, create more revenue from our resources? And with more revenues, that means also development is going to be unstoppable in the country. Less revenue is actually going to be the other side of the coin.
And Honorable, as lawmakers, how can you help in monitoring this cost-saving exercise to make sure it is effectively implemented and not just a mere pronouncement?
I think there are several ways that we can do that. Normally when you look at the budget itself, start from the formulation, the approval, and then execution, and then the oversight that comes actually at the end, which is when actually is being executed. Now, along the way, there are several layers we can actually be checking. For example, some of the committees actually, they can call the ministries, and the fact that we have a budget office now also makes it even much easier for us, because at any time we can actually see the actuals of what actually has transpired in any of the ministries or any of the MDS. So that actually helping us. In fact, I remember last year when we were doing the review of the budget, actually we were getting real-time numbers. Yeah, so that's why sometimes when we ask you, why are you putting this amount of money in this budget? You said, oh, no, because of we want to do the A, B, C, or D. We say, no, because right now where you are, we have not even spent more than 50% of what we have given you. So that actually allows us to be able to cut those things. So we were able to do the monitoring through our budget office that we actually created, and we recently hired a second person to be in the budget office to do that. But above all, also, I think, we have a special directorate that people don't really pay good attention to, which is called the Internal Audit Directorate. You see, this particular directorate actually can help the government also to be able to check a lot of things before actually they go to fruition. Because if you, the Auditor General actually comes after the budget execution. But before the budget execution, that's where the internal audit actually can come in to help a lot of government on some of the wastages actually can do. Like we have the GPPA, you also have the internal audit. So I think for me, there's a need for us to take a look at the strategy of the internal audit directorate to be able to stop, to be able to reduce, or to be able to, in fact, advise on wastage. If you look at the private sector, for example, most of the things that we actually do, the internal audit actually have a great role to play. In fact, before you even make a payment, for the most institutions that I worked for before, the internal audit will actually check to verify this is actually in line with your budget, and this in line, there's value for money. And then they authorize before you actually are paid. So, and I think as a government, I think that's actually where we need to also focus on now. What can we do to be able to empower the internal audit directorate before the budget actually executed? So which means they are part of the process. So which means by the time the Auditor General comes in, most of the things actually that we are querying now, after the audit is done, is going to be reduced. So, and I think there needs to be some strategies to actually empower them more, to ensure that they have the resources it takes for them to be able to check every single transaction before actually it crystallizes. And I think that's one of the good areas we can do.
And Matt, to the CSOs, how can you also play your role as watchdogs to ensure this is implemented?
Yeah, on two fronts. Civil society organization can serve as an external oversight body on government in terms of the decision and implementation of issues like the budget that have been approved to them. But on the other side as well, civil society needs to be bringing this suggestion and work with government, right, to realize this. Because I always keep saying, if the government fails, we all fail, right, including the opposition. And that's the reason why in other countries, you see oppositions working with the government on addressing certain issues where they have common interests, right? It's not about competition. It's about getting things done for the people, right? And the same thing for civil society. And then also, when you advocate on the left side, and then you also do your oversight on the other side. So I guess when we have that relationship, and then honestly, we've not been having conversation with the government. Have not been coming. The government, or let's say the president, have not been having this conversation with the civil society, right? He has conversation with you, the media, the oppositions, right, the others. But for civil society, the president, since he came into office, have not met the civil society to have a conversation like this, bringing solutions.
Mr. President, you should arrange a meeting with the CSOs. Chief of Staff, most cases, should arrange that quickly so that you meet with the CSOs and also get to
because
hear
we are
from
not enemies
them.
to the government.
Yeah.
We are not enemies to the government.
Exactly.
That's what some people criticize us for working with the government. Yeah. Really, but they might not get the issue. The civil society brings in solutions, because when you advocate, I keep saying, when you advocate, you're advocating for something better and the change. And the press button that I was talking about, we don't have it as civil society. We cannot always be on the streets fighting, right? It's not going to be healthy. But when we work together, we bring in solutions, show you how to do it, and then at the end of the day, we all achieve our common interest, that is to get things done. So I believe those are some of the conversations that we need to have. Obviously, we cannot be stopped from going to the street. You have those that will go to the streets to actually counter certain decisions. But then, like we said, and in advocacy, there are those that react to government decisions, and there are those that work on addressing the root causes of the problem. And I guess that's
Honorable, we agree with Mar that your president, your party is in alliance with the NPP. Yes. You support the idea that the president will convene a meeting with the CSOs. No?
Yes, I think when you look at the country, actually, we all work together for the benefit of the country, and whether you are opposition or not, any one of you that you ask for, they said, "Oh, I want to do this for the betterment of the country." So which means we have a common denominator. So once we have a common denominator, which is the Gambia, we should be able to talk to each other. We should be able to extend a hand. Let's talk. But we must also talk maturely, and we must also ensure that you are not talking to an ordinary person, because you are talking to a head of state. And I think some of the suggestions that we actually get from the CSOs, actually, even in the parliament, we actually incorporate in what we do. So they make a lot of sense. But we must also remember at the end of the day that you must not be a wolf in sheep clothing. Get out there, get your message out there that will actually help the country. But above all, you must be very objective in your analysis, you must be very objective in really what you want to do. And for me personally, I think the president will not be will not send that kind of idea that you really want to do. And I think maybe by the time you get in consultation with Maud Kesise, I'm sure he'll be able to arrange something. So this is a conversation that we actually have to have as a country. And I think the Barrow being who he is, I don't think he's adverse to those kind of meetings and them talking to people objectively and especially things that actually can help the country. And he has ministers, he has cabinet ministers, but it doesn't mean that they are the best in the country. It doesn't mean that. There are people out there, that are from the outside looking in, and I think those are the kind of people that we should need to be listening to or looking at. Because of when you are from the outside looking in fact, you have some very good ideas. But above all, those that are in it also really have a better idea about what is actually happening. But again, these external things coming from, I can actually also help them. And for me, I think I can't even tell of any ministry that is not actually open to those kind of suggestions. But I think once we get this ball rolling, he'll be able to extend and then they'll be able to talk, mutually, particular thing that actually can help the country.
Mar, in 5 seconds, finally, in 5 seconds, your final message, because time is up.
Well, my message is, the resources that we have. And this, I won't actually even talk about the resources, but the travel ban, we really commend the government decision on that. And then really, let's look at the data that will come out of this travel ban and then see how we can actually implement this, travel policy that we have and also get into the issue of rents, especially our rents outside the source of the Gambia.
Yeah, and the vehicle policy and all those things. Unfortunately, time wouldn't allow us to go into the vehicle policy and fueling, which is also consuming millions as far as the government expenditure is concerned. Most of the time when you go out after working hours, you see government vehicles everywhere. You wonder what are they doing at 8 p.m., 9 p.m. at night. But then that's it for this week's edition of the State of Affairs program. Our guest this week were Honorable Alaji Mbow, National Assembly Member for Upper Salem Constituency and Vice Chairman of the FPAC Committee at the Parliament. Honorable Mbow, it was good to have you on the program.
Thank you very much.
And of course, Mar Nyang, a good friend of this program, founder and executive director of Gambia Participants. Mar, it was good to have you on the program.
Thank you so much.
And once again, viewers, thank you so much for watching. And finally, Mr. President, try to meet these CSOs. It's a call that we are making for you to dialogue with them on issues affecting this country. Well, viewers, do join us next week. Until then, bye-bye from me, Alu Sise, and the entire production team. Ciao.